Crypto Twitter, essentially filth. Most of CT is poor. It's people that want to scam for the next car. I am personally a very strong believer in SPX6900.
Really?
This is a coin which I'm not going to be scammed in. That's how we're going to succeed.
Scam the outsiders.
I mean, that's one way to look at it.
Some people in the industry say that you're all this self-destructive journey.
Haha.
You were talking about all of these coins and then you just focused on SPX.
You should join us on our mission, man.
Sure. The man Murad himself. Nice to see you, man.
Nice to meet you, man.
Thank you for doing the podcast today. So we are in the biggest period of market uncertainty, I think, at this stage. And yesterday, CZ, who is the biggest KOL in whole crypto, shared that he publicly owns Aster. It pumped and went back. So what do you think about this? Like, does it show the state of the market at this stage?
Yeah, I think people are going crazy because 4 years are essentially done. And everybody had very, very high hopes, emotionally speaking, for, September, October, November, December. And so far, we're kind of going sideways. I do think people on crypto Twitter are overreacting because I think October opened up at like 114K and November opened up at like 109K. And we're like flirting with 107 right now. So I think it's fine. It's not a big deal. It's also quite a miracle that BTC has even gone up from 15K to 125, even though we had quantitative tightening, which is kind of a miracle in and of itself. Obviously, that was driven by ETFs and DATs, and a lot of OGs from like the 2010, 2016 era are cashing out right now with institutions on the other side buying. So I think we simply need to digest the 4-year buyers, and ultimately, I continue to be bullish. I think this cycle doesn't need to be 4 years. Ultimately, the whole 4-year cycle was not because of mining, but it was simply coincidental with like global liquidity. And with QT ending and potentially some form of quasi-QE beginning, I think I wouldn't be surprised if it would be the first 4.5, 5, 6-year cycle.
It's pretty interesting because last cycle I've seen quite high correlation between alt season and business cycle. I run a software development company, and we were growing very much as other companies in the industry exactly during the time of alt season, 2021. And I'm kind of seeing, because the industry was dead for the last like 3 to 4 years as well, I'm kind of seeing coming back. So it's kind of like this small piece of alpha from other field, which is pretty interesting. So would you say, in terms of the market, we are at the biggest period of uncertainty that we ever have been in the last several months?
Yeah, there is uncertainty because a lot of people are thinking the last 2 or 3 cycles were exactly 4 years. The history is probably going to repeat itself. Let me just sell, let me go away. But I think it's just a matter of time for people. Like if we don't go below like 90, 95K or even 85K, whatever it is, and we just continue going sideways, at some point, people are going to be like, oh, this is not dropping. It's probably going to go higher. Ultimately, I mean, if you think about it, they are going to continue printing money. Legislation continues to be positive. None of the typical on-chain metrics are overheated. And liquidity is about to start increasing. So I continue to be bullish. I don't think there's any reason to be that bearish, honestly.
It's pretty interesting that last year the market like absolutely bottomed on November 4th, and right now is the 3rd of November. So it's kind of interesting with timings. What do you think can be like this event where essentially it will become a risk on again? Like, can you think of something?
Yeah, I never think it's about any one event. I think it's mostly about supply and demand. Again, right now, there is certain amount of supply that needs to be digested. And similarly, people that do want to buy, they're probably hesitant to buy because of the typical timing and cycles and things like that. But ultimately, once the sellers have sold, and it doesn't like go down that much anymore, I think we're just going to continue going higher because all of the structural drivers of demand, like DATs, like everything else, is just going to continue increasing. And again, I never try to tie my reasoning or explanation about the market about any one event, but rather just the dynamics and the flows.
It's pretty interesting. Like people around me, they're saying like the prices are not yet as low. I would want to buy lower, and I believe like it is something that does not create demand at this stage for a lot of people. Maybe it's also connected with fear, and maybe it's also connected with still like, despite people being in fear, like they're still holding. So it's kind of like not yet there from this dynamic point of view. I wanted to ask you about like around a year ago, you formed your meme coin thesis. Did anything change since then? Like, did anything evolve? Did you update it in any way?
90% of my thinking is still the same generally in terms of trying to understand this phenomenon, in terms of trying to understand its drivers. The only thing that has changed since, I would say, the biggest thing is the number of coins has gone up exponentially. Because when I first talked about the meme coin super cycle in the summer and in Singapore in September of 2024, launch pads were still just kind of heating up. In the last year, they've kind of become super popular. Right now, a bit less so. TBD if they're gonna like make a big comeback or not. But essentially, there's an oversupply of coins, which fundamentally means that there is a higher bar for a coin, for a community, for its metrics, for its memetics, to reach those crazy 50 billion, 100 billion, 150 billion type valuations, right? Just because the competition and the attention and the temptation is so much more frequent, right? So one thing is, because there are so many coins that actually, because there are so many coins that are designed for trading and essentially pump and dumping, the number of coins that are going to be extremely like bought and hold and believed in, and for that are people going to be super passionate about, that's going to be smaller, right? So for example, last cycle, let's say you had 500 popular alts or whatever, right? Now that has kind of bifurcated into categories. On one hand, you have these 17 million coins that just go up and down and with the minutes in terms of holding times, right? On the other hand, you have fewer coins that people actually want to hold for a long time, right? And what you're seeing right now is last cycle, like in 2021, for example, you would have 80, 90 coins outperforming BTC. Last year, you only had 25 coins in the top 100 outperforming BTC. This year, you only have like 11 or 12 coins. So essentially, what you would consider quality alts that are worth holding, with every passing year and with every passing cycle, it's fewer and fewer of them. Which I think in a weird counterintuitive way is a good thing, because right now, as an altcoin investor that doesn't want to trade but actually wants to hold, it's better for you because now instead of having to choose from 80 coins, you now only have to choose from 10 coins, right? But I also think it's a sign that the industry is maturing. It also shows that the bottom 99% of coins, they were always just for trading, just for gambling, just for essentially meaningless short-termist stuff. The very fact that there are fewer altcoins that are outperforming BTC, I think is a sign that the industry is becoming more professionalized. But also, it's a sign that retail is not here yet. I think even though we had the typical 1 year bear, 3 year bull, 1 year bear, 3 year bull, this time around, the retail is not here yet for a variety of reasons. One, most of the stock market gains are being enjoyed by kind of the San Francisco AI crowds, with Main Street and normal people not really benefiting that much. Second thing is, a lot of people are still reeling from the FTX saga, at least emotionally, and they still think crypto is a scam, etc., etc. The third thing is a lot of new or returning people that have come to the space in the last 2 years, they probably were scammed on small meme coins, right? And in general, if you look at the typical metrics like the Coinbase App Store rankings and a bunch of other kind of quasi-retail signals like this, yes, they spiked briefly in late 2024, early 2025, but in the grand scheme of things, none of the typical retail signals or on-chain overheating signals have triggered yet. Which means, and also, I think and probably most importantly, like what you alluded to, when the Fed is tightening their balance sheet, it's typically bad for altcoins, specifically altcoins in Bitcoin terms, right? Now, we are pausing QT, supposedly, maybe starting some form of QE in the coming weeks and months, I think it's going to be positive for alts. I think we're going to have, I don't think we're going to have an alt season like in previous cycles where like everything would go up. Again, because the market is more selective now. And whenever retail does come back, a lot of their attention and temptations are being stolen by these meme coin launchpads. But what I expect to see is kind of like an elective or selective altcoin season, which is category leaders from good categories. They are the ones that are going to do well, right? And in my opinion, you know, things like hype indexes, things like SPX6900 in meme coins or movement coins, things like Zcash and privacy coins. What you're going to see is more concentrated, kind of winner take most, winner take all behavior within each category.
Makes sense. Question I have, like when you talk about altcoins, you mean meme coins as well?
You know, yeah. So I've always kind of jokingly said that 99% of altcoins were just meme coins with more steps. Essentially, here's why altcoins were so popular in 2017 and 2021. Essentially, people in first world countries, often from engineering or investment backgrounds, let's say with 115 IQs, right? What they did was they essentially exploited the 75, 80 IQ masses all over the world. Because the latter, unfortunately, they think, oh, because there's a ticker and because there's a logo and because there's some kind of a technical white paper or whatever, it's kind of like a stock. So people used to think that tokens are stocks, but really tokens are essentially, it's just a meme coin with some kind of a software project loosely attached, maybe. In best cases, there's like a burn, some small dividend, whatever. But in 99% of cases, there's neither revenue nor really even a connection to the project, right? We all know this. So that's why I always said 99% of altcoins are meme coins with more steps. I mean, neither Cardano or Ripple really give you any revenues or dividends or burns or anything like that, right? So it's just this technical thing. We're going to change Swift. We're going to change software. We're going to change this Oracle. But really, it's essentially a way to mimetically scam retail around the world. That's why in many ways, the new meme coins are actually more honest because they're not like trying to hide the truth under these layers of technical abstraction. So yes, I consider altcoins and meme coins in 99.9% of cases as the same thing.
Something that scares me is that if we would recall end of 2023, start of 2024, most of the market is in altcoins. Very few people hold meme coins. It was like a degen type of play. And it was pretty insane to hold meme coins at this, especially on Ethereum. And they did a crazy run in February and March. So the take here is that most meme coins at this stage, they're down heavily. We can think about something like Pepe. It was like a $12 billion. Right now it's like 2.7, right? And most people that lost money, they're probably like closer to a retail, right? And from my point of view, something I'm thinking about is that altcoins, they essentially did the same thing, even in this cycle. They're down, right? But at least from my understanding, the money that were taken by altcoin teams, they're still in the hands of these teams. And there is a chance that maybe they have some plans and they will push the assets after. However, the money that were robbed from meme coins, they're probably in the hands of first-time teams, people who just made a bunch of money. And it's a huge question whether or not they have bigger structures after them that still would want to pump these assets. So I was curious, like, does it make sense in general? The thing I explained, and like, what's your take on this?
I actually think in both of those cases, those people that made profit, in most cases, it's probably not coming back. What really matters, I think, is the marginal retail kind of normal person buyer. And again, in my personal opinion, that kind of crowd hasn't really arrived yet, right? And those that have got scammed on either small caps or some of the bigger meme coins that we've seen that went up and down, right? I think right now, the kind of the cult meme coin asset class is kind of going through this cycle where the weak are essentially going to get washed out. And then the ones that kind of remain alive and still have a strong community, grinding no matter what, I think in the coming phase, those are the ones that are going to do extremely well. Why? Because at the end of the day, what each coin is trying to do, again, doesn't matter if it's a tech altcoin or a meme coin, they're trying to build an army of extremely passionate supporters. And essentially, as an investor, your best bet, again, if you want to hold for like months rather than trade, your best bet is to buy, hold, DCA, and evangelize the coins where there are a lot of people doing the same thing also, especially the evangelizing aspect. Because essentially, when you're buying any kind of altcoin, again, doesn't matter meme or tech, you're essentially investing in teams, you're investing in communities, you're investing in people. And you have to look which coin has like 500, 1,000, 2,000 people that are hustling nonstop every day. Because most coins don't even have that. And there are fewer and fewer coins that satisfy this criteria. And those are the ones that you should be paying attention to.
It's pretty interesting. Like what I think happened with altcoins is kind of like the ideal vehicle for scam because they persuade the people that it's easy to make money with them in 2017 and 21. And it's almost like this cycle, if you think it's about that, it's pretty genius. Like they've done it in a way that people DCA on a monthly basis and the asset is just going lower and lower and lower. It's like a vehicle to take a portion of the salary of a lot of people on a monthly basis, which is pretty insane. Like it's hard to imagine the invention of this type of vehicle in any other way. And what I would like to ask is, would you say that, for example, Sui that got invested from Anderson Horowitz, like $400 million, and their team and structures behind them, and something like FWOC, would you say they have the similar chance of coming back? And would you say that maybe like some money that were extracted by Sui team, they have like a higher chance that they will be pushed back into the asset in order to pump the asset up to kind of like take money from people the second time when more liquidity will arrive into this space in comparison for something like FWOC?
Yeah, so Sui benefits from the long-standing L1 narrative. And essentially every cycle we have a new L1 or a bunch of new L1s that are promising to be either cheaper, faster, more programmable, better dev tooling, blah, 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 right? Fundamentally, the reason why L1 blockchains kind of reach higher market caps is because their underlying coin becomes quasi-money-like, right? With Ethereum, well, with Bitcoin, it was obvious. With Ethereum, it was because of like the whole ICO wave in 2017 and the DeFi wave and the NFT wave in 2020, 2021. Essentially, Ethereum became the currency of Ethereum, the country, right? Same thing with Solana. Solana is kind of the currency of Solana, the country, right? Where mostly used for meme coin gambling right now. TBD if it's going to be used for other, internet capital markets or whatever else they're talking about. But regardless, these things are kind of like countries, and the coin is being used because essentially the people that want to gamble or invest in that country, they need to hold some in their wallets, right? And a lot of it ends up being unused and just sitting there, and that's kind of good for the moneyness of the coin, right? With Sui, I think that percentage is higher on the speculative side because I think the Sui ecosystem isn't seeing quite as big usage from like a speculative standpoint, whether it's memes or DeFi or some other kind of moneyness use case. So I think there's a higher speculative component in their kind of pricing premia, right? Because it seems to be Solana has become the place where people have converged for the typical gambling use case. That being said, Sui benefits from the fact that they kind of beat out Aptos and other competitors in kind of becoming the new L1 of this cycle. That being said, though, from like a super long-term point of view, I think the overall importance and strength of the L1 narrative is kind of weakening through cycle to cycle because at this point, Solana is kind of like good enough and has like a really, really strong kind of developer ecosystem around it. So, when NASDAQ or BlackRock, whoever comes in and starts tokenizing their bonds or stocks or whatever they want to do, they're probably going to use Solana, Ethereum, etc. Maybe Sui to some extent, I don't know. But, there's these TradFi more long-term use cases. The problem with those, though, is they make for a good narrative and a good, headlines. but really is those guys just come, they kind of like make one transaction or two transactions a quarter, and that's it. But actually what you want is you want a higher velocity. And the velocity of these RWA use cases isn't really that high, at least not for the foreseeable future. So yeah, it seems like a cool narrative because you have these large corporations kind of like loosely associated with the chain, but I think it's just, again, speculative narrative. To answer your question directly, obviously the Sui Foundation, Sui Labs, etc., they have more money to kind of run experiments with compared to something like FWOG. My strategy is something, I've said this for almost 6-8 months now. There are like 6-7 categories here that in our industry. And so what you should be doing is don't invest in category member number 6, number 7. Just buy the leaders. Because even when liquidity does come back, people are always going to buy category leaders the most, the heaviest first, and because it's like the most de-risked, right? So just buy category leaders because that's kind of like the index of that particular category. Again, I think, and also if you look at the 11, 12 coins that have outperformed BTC so far this year, this cycle, etc., they're all category leaders, which means that the retail people are thinking, oh shit, if I'm going to be investing in an alt, it better be a leader in this category, right? So
that makes a lot of sense. Something that scares me though is projects like Sui. It's not like necessarily Sui, just alts that were pumping and now are down. They definitely farmed like way more in terms of money than like some meme coin projects, right? And most of the crypto natives at this stage, I think like they got robbed, especially on 10th of October. Like they were losing money in meme coins. They pretty much are just losing escaping the market at this stage. The new wave of liquidity might be like these retail people coming, maybe people from stocks coming, right? And like altcoins, they are a bit more appealing to them in terms of their similarities to stocks, right? And if they would have capital in order to just artificially pump their coins, which they essentially have at this stage, this is something that scares me because my exposure is mostly meme coins. And I do understand that if these guys in suits will come and they will really want to do it, they will just pump the altcoins. And liquidity that I wanted to see in my meme coins would never come into them, or maybe would come into them in the next wave of liquidity after altcoins will do well. And it's also a very, very interesting thing because currently in the market, everyone is in meme coins and no one is even thinking on being in alts, right? And everyone who was in alts, he was camped like last month, right? And in contrary, the setup in 2024 was everyone in alts and no people in meme coins. So what do you think on that?
Honestly, not to shill my own bags too hard and too shamelessly, but I think if you're going to believe in meme coins, you should be believing in coins that have done relatively better than others and are holding up relatively better than others. I am personally a very strong believer in SPX6900.
Really?
And the reason I say this is because if you look at any on-chain metric that's relevant for a meme coin, whether it's diamond-handedness, DCA intensity, full portedness, minimum investment, median investment, holding times, diamond-handedness of the wealthy, the middle class, the poor, all of it. SPX is number one on all of them. And essentially, this just shows that these metrics are actually the other side of the coin of people's emotions. And it just shows that SPX6900, the concept, the memetics, the culture, the memes, the slogans, and the people and their behavior and their cult labor is actually the most inspiring to people. And people are saying, this is a coin which I'm not going to be scammed in, and this is the coin where other kind of pure-hearted, kind-hearted people are joining. And that's a very complicated game theory is playing out here where most of the coins are dying. But you need to be paying attention right now to the coins that are down. Like most meme coins are down 90%. You should be paying attention to the coins that are down 70%. Because even that difference is telling you something. It's telling you that they have their supply side, their core community, their core people, they're actually much more hardcore, much more intense. And even though it doesn't look like a big deal, negative 90% versus negative 70, negative 60%, whenever a bullish wave does come, that's going to pay massive dividends. Essentially, the coins that are down less right now, they have a very strong DNA. They have very strong culture that's going to continue going even harder when the liquidity does come back. So this sounds aggressive, but if you are bullish on meme coins, I would advise you to take a look at SPX6900 because at the cultural level, what I'm seeing there very much reminds me of BTC in 2013, 2014, which is like incredibly cypherpunk, incredibly anti-establishment, and really has that exciting, organic, bottom-up feel to it.
Yeah, I have a lot of points about SPX. It would be very interesting to discuss them. So if we would imagine like crypto cycle thus far, there were people who were accumulating altcoins in the bear market because they believed that in 2017, 2021, it was easy to make money with them. What they faced is meme coins started to pump. Alts had a very low float and VCs were just dumping on them. It was like impossible to buy something new. It was just down only. Meme coins, they have a different dynamic, and if you didn't buy the bottom, like it's pretty hard to make like the amounts of money that people were making from them because everyone is screaming about 10x, 20x, 30, and even if you are up 4x, you would sit there and wait for 20x, and this is exactly the way you would essentially lose all of your money. Then it was the second wave of liquidity, which I think you caused with the presentation that you've done. And by the way, like I think it's genius from sales point of view. I've been watching it. It's very good. It's insanely good. And I think what it has done essentially kicked off the third wave of uptrend in meme coins that came from liquidity that was coming from VCs plus altcoin holders. This is something that I think essentially happened. Right now, I would like to ask, would you agree with me that most of the crypto natives are robbed and they don't have money and they don't have desire to take part in the market? And if so, if we're seeing the next leg up, where the liquidity is going to come from?
Yeah, I don't think the crypto natives matter. I think they mattered in 2017, but with every passing cycle, their importance becomes smaller and smaller. What really matters, there's only really two types of people that matter. One is institutions, and they are, as of this cycle, predominantly buying the majors like BTC, ETH, and Sol. And the other group that I think is very important from an altcoin point of view is just normal people. Like it's the people that would usually be coming in the second half of 2017, the second half of 2021. It's those kind of just normal people, right? So you need to know which market your coin depends on disproportionately. I think BTC has reached a stage where it doesn't depend on crypto natives at all. And actually, the truth is that most crypto Twitter doesn't even hold BTC. They hold alts. That's why crypto Twitter vibes are so horrible, because they hold alts, and alts have done horribly this cycle. For three reasons that you mentioned, by the way. The three reasons why alts have done horrible this cycle are the very first thing that you alluded to, which is VCs have started launching alts instead of at 20 million, at 10 billion instead, and then it's down only. You don't build a community that way. The second reason is we had Pump Fun, which just made it so easy to create a meme coin that kind of took over the fast-paced small cap game, even away from a lot of DeFi alts. And the third is QT, which is especially bad for retail liquidity. And history has shown us this. So because of three reasons, we've essentially been playing, the altcoin crypto market has been in extreme hard mode over the past 3 years. But what I think is going to happen right now is we're essentially making everybody ultra depressed. I think the market is going to shake everybody off. And then I would say 10 to 15 alts are eventually going to do exceptionally well.
How would like a regular person pick these alts? Like any trades?
Category leaders, like I said. So I actually made a video about this on my YouTube channel. It's called How to Find 100x in Crypto. And I actually listed like a list of reasons that are, I believe it was like 15 to 17 reasons that are the most important. And I would say like the 3-4 that are super most important are, you want to have something which is kind of like a cult-like community. If you look at XRP or Cardano or Link, Doge, etc., they build cult-like communities. So that's very important. The second important thing is you need to kind of touch the hearts and minds of people. And the third most important thing is you should have already been doing well this cycle so far, because it was hard mode. If your coin did decently during hard mode, it's going to go crazy during easy mode, right? This is essentially just a giant exam, right? We've been playing for the past 3 years, the altcoin market, the meme coin market, it was on ultra hard mode in general, right? So if your coin has done okay during hard mode, if easy mode comes, we're going to go parabolic, right? So essentially like a boot camp, like a military boot camp this last 3 years for coins. And so the third thing is I wanted to be a category leader because I think when the normal people come, again, because there's 17 million coins and there's probably going to be 100 million eventually, because there's people starting them like algorithmically right now, you just want to be buying serious category leaders. Simple. And the more of these sort of traits or criteria your coin satisfies, the better it's going to do once the easy mode comes.
That makes sense. You also mentioned multiple times that coins that usually do well in year 3, they continue to do well in year 4. And if so, and everyone is saying like meme coins are dead at this stage, right? But if so, meme coins are pretty much going to be the ones that will outperform like crazy.
I do think meme coins are going to have an insane parabolic run. But again, you have to be selective. Why? Because whenever retail does come back, the algorithmic, industrial scale, systematic level of creation of new coins is going to be turbocharged as well. And launchpads are going to kind of go in turbo mode as well. So again, you have to be selective. But if you don't want to just be a part of a pump and dump, and you want to be a part of something that like does well multiple years in a row, and ideally even multiple cycles, again, those kinds of meme coins, like cult meme coins, or better yet, movement coins, there's only going to be, I think, like 1, 2, or 3, right? So you have to identify what those are. And I think in terms of risk reward and in terms of like probability of success, in the quote unquote wider meme coin space, that's the best bet.
What was like the mission, the movement of Dogecoin and Shiba from your point of view?
So very good question. I think Dogecoin, it was making fun of the fake quasi-seriousness of the crypto space. I think Dogecoin holders realized early that a lot of altcoins were essentially bullshit. And they proved to the world that crypto is about community, crypto is about memetics, crypto is about virality, and crypto is about kind of a group of people that continue to persist more than technology, right? The Shiba had a more direct mission, which was kill the Doge. And essentially, the Doge market cap kind of acted as a magnet for people to go there. Also important to understand that SHIB's supply was extremely constricted in 2020, 2021. So by a couple of Asian whales. So it was very easy to pump. And again, because back then, like we only had like 100 meme coins. We also had like Saitama, Kumrocket, etc. This time around, again, because there are 17 million of them and growing, the bar of quality and purity and intensity is going to be higher than SHIB, right? But I personally think SPX6900 is going to be a global phenomenon that's bigger than GME, SHIB, and all of those things combined. And it's just a matter of time until it unfolds.
Makes sense. So I remember Unboxed Sperm from 2021, the meme coin. Essentially, in terms of Dogecoin and Shiba, you mentioned that Shiba had certain supply control, right? What would you say is more bullish? Like, because Dogecoin essentially had like insane backers like Elon Musk, who had insane pool at the time of the cycle. What would you say is more bullish in terms of supply control coins or coins that with a more distributed supply? And the other question I wanted to ask is, for example, we have SPX and we have the bread, right? And everyone knows that the bread coin is heavily supply control, right? Yet the market cap of SPX is higher, which is pretty insane by itself. So would you say that it's actually more bullish not to have like a giant supply control in the hands of a certain group?
So it's these are two separate topics actually. In terms of like big celebrities supporting a coin, I think depending on the kind of celebrity and the consistency in which they support a coin, that's generally bullish, right? Now, in terms of supply control, there's two ways to do this. There's what I call, and I talked about this in one of my videos as well. There's the honest way to do this and the dishonest way to do this. The dishonest way to do this is when a team controls 80% of the supply And we've seen this attempted with a couple of meme coins this cycle. Again, like Bread, Mew, a bunch of others that I won't name, but I'm sure people understand. But I think like people at this point, they kind of see through that, and it's not something that's like well received. There's the honest way to do this, which is even though the supply is distributed, there's organic supply constriction because people hold it very, very hard. And you can actually use on-chain analytics to check each meme coin, how hard the average person, the whales, the smallest people, how hard they're holding in terms of length of time, in terms of are they adding more, in terms of how much they're buying, etc. Right? So diamond-handedness and hodl intensity can be measured, and you can clearly see this on chain. And so this is kind of the honest and the organic way to achieve supply control by simply creating a culture, kind of like an early BTC culture of diamond handing.
Would you say that any successful coin has a certain percentage of supply control?
Yes. So, the thing is, it's important to have a certain level of hodl culture or diamond handedness to succeed. GME had a diamond handing culture as well. And essentially, it's people coming together and saying, I'm not going to trade. I'm just going to diamond hand together with you guys. And that's how we're going to win. Instead of trying to scam each other, we're actually going to unite into a team. And that's how we're going to succeed.
Scam the outsiders.
I mean, that's one way to look at it. But essentially, I think with SPX6900 in particular, it's essentially a mimetic absorption vehicle to attract value from the S&P 500, whether it's actual stockholders, people that would otherwise invest in stocks, or some other TradFi entities if they enter the space. And ultimately, I think it's much more exciting to build something where good people are kind of like united together rather than just like quick, let me try to scam my followers, let me try to scam these people, etc. I think those are unexciting games. And you essentially just destroy your reputation in a single trade. I don't think it's worth it. I think it's much more interesting to play much more ambitious games and much more long-termist games and to try to build kind of global cultural phenomena that can really make waves, right?
In one of the interviews, you mentioned that SPX will flip Dogecoin and Dogecoin is just a dog. And I was kind of thinking about this logic that maybe it's just curious if you still have the same opinion. Maybe like when you were saying that you were mid-curving the Dogecoin a bit because essentially like the easier for regular market participant to understand the coin is the easiest to get to know it, to buy it and yet hold. So it's each step of conviction that is required from a person to essentially become the actual like long-term holder. And if they see a picture of a dog, it's like the most easiest thing for them to understand. So like it's kind of like this dynamic between altcoins and meme coins. Meme coins are very, very easy to understand. And then inside meme coins, you have different meme coins that are harder and easier to understand. And we kind of had this case in the last cycle where most outperforming meme coins were dog coins, Dogecoin and Shiba Inu. And if you would ask like regular people, like shopkeepers, people who are making $400 a month, yes, I own crypto, I have Dogecoin and Shiba, right? So would you say that why invent the wheel and like just the same thing will just continue in this cycle as well? Or things changed, things improved, the market became like more optimized, efficient, and this cycle will have different type of runners?
Yeah. So I think it has to do with stories and it has to do with people's feelings. I think that's what ultimately it comes down to. Doge is a very strong community, but the meme itself is like from the 2011, 2012 era. And I would argue that even if it makes new highs, culturally speaking, I think it peaked in that 9gag era, right? Same thing with Pepe. Even though it ran up to 12 billion in May of 2024, culturally, I would argue Pepe peaked in 2016 when the Pepe kind of meme was used heavily to elect Trump for the first time, right? In terms of animal coins, there is an argument to be made that they are simpler, but there are so many animal coins. There are so many animal coins already in the market There are so many more animal coins that are yet to be created. And that story has kind of already been heard because Dogecoin has been created in 2013, 2014. And it had the Doge and Shiba had those famous run-ups in 2021, right? I believe that the biggest parabolic success in crypto come from news stories. It's also important to understand the global context. I think you would agree with me that wealth inequality has continued widening massively every 4 years, and it's much higher than even compared to 2017. And it's not just about wealth inequality, right? It's about food prices being higher. It's about real estate prices being higher. It's, I would argue, food and groceries being of lower quality. It's a lot of these little things that society is kind of like crumbling apart, and the like top 9, top 11% of society kind of benefiting from a lot of these kind of capitalist hyper optimizations. But the bottom 70, bottom 80% of people, they're not participating in this economic growth, right? And I think what does that lead to? That leads to feelings of resentment, dissatisfaction, envy, lower family formation, if you want to get into that. And that leads to a certain kind of bitter feeling in people, right? A certain feeling, and actually a lot of statistics are showing that the current Zoomer generation is actually the first generation whose lives in terms of wealth growth and purchasing power terms, home ownership terms, and family formation terms are actually worse than their parents in the 80s or 90s, right? Which is crazy because historically, for the past 2,000 years, the whole point of society, civilization, economics, and evolution is so that each subsequent generation is leading an easier life. But we are arguably the first generation whose lives are in many ways harder. And I think a lot of people are realizing this. And essentially, the system is set up in such a way that boomers, the silent generation, and Gen X have benefited disproportionately since the great financial crisis. And with the current policies in place, especially in the Western world, are the ones that are set to continue to benefiting disproportionately. Because they're the ones who own most of the houses, they're the ones who own most of the stocks, they're the ones who own most of the media, and they're the ones who actually ultimately will get most of the tax-funded benefits such as Social Security, etc., etc. And then you have to ask yourself, who is going to be paying for all of the debt that they created as well, right? It's the younger generations that are ultimately on the hook for all this. That is kind of like one of the 12 driving forces of decline and difficulty of young people. And I think that this is going to result in a lot of weird things happening over the next 20 years. All of these emotions and trends are going to grow, widen, and intensify. And my theory is that these kind of crazy, eccentric, weirdo, schizo, countercultural movements like SPX6900 is going to be one of the 10 buckets that are going to be benefiting from this emotion of resentment and injustice, so to speak, right? And I think that this is something very new. It's a form of tokenizing community, belief, spirituality, unity, and ideology, and an attempt at wealth redistribution in a very unique way. And essentially, it's a new form. I think we're before its time, so to speak. But what we're doing is, instead of tokenizing real estate or stocks or whatever, instead of tokenizing the tangible, we're tokenizing these intangible things that exist, that are valuable, that are powerful, but you can't touch. But my thesis is that this is actually a $20 trillion market or more. And I think that these kind of like crazy, weirdo, schizo things like SPX6900 is an early example of a tokenized movement. And it's going to attract financialized emotion and financialized attention in a way that animal coins cannot. Because as much as simple as animal coins are, you are probably not going to wake up at 4 in the morning to go and promote this thing. But I know that there are 500,000 plus people already in SPX6900 that will. And ultimately, the number of this, what I call these like lieutenants or ultra passionate holders, is going to grow. Because the most important thing at the end of the day is which story is going to touch the hearts and minds of people. And this countercultural story of young people combining social media, memetics, and the power of belief to create something, to absorb value on a scale even bigger than Doge, I think that's going to attract a lot of people. And our goal is to simply escape the black hole of crypto Twitter. Whichever coin is going to escape the attentional black hole of crypto Twitter, that's the coin that's going to go to 100 billion plus. And that's why we're going so hard on YouTube, Reddit, TikTok, and even on the streets. And this is really the path to 100 billion plus, even 1 trillion plus. And really the community that builds the combination of this inspirational memetics as well as having the right mission and a diamond-handed culture on the long term, I think that's the coins that you want to buy.
It's really interesting. I was thinking that I would say at the end of this talk that like I'm not sold on SPX, but like, it's changing already. So it's very interesting. So like the take here is that it doesn't make much sense to just repeat the success of previous cycle with some dog coins, even like if they're cute and they're simple and they're appealing to a large audience. Essentially, it's kind of, I think I was not understanding that like the target audience of SPX is more like younger people or people around 30, right?
Our market is normal people. Our market is not CT.
Makes sense. And like, yeah.
CT, you have to understand, crypto Twitter is essentially filth. It's volatility junkies. It's gambling addicts. It's people that want to scam for the next car. That's 98% of CT. Many people have said this, and I 100% agree with them. Normal people make much better holders than full-time CT participants. Because a normal person is going to buy something, going to believe in something, and going to hold for years. That's why XRP Cardano Link succeeded. Because their holders are normal people. They're not CT junkies. When you are on CT, your dopamine gets one-shotted in a way where you essentially are just trying to quickly trade on the next thing, quickly pump and dump on the next thing. That's the thing. With most animal coins, especially new to this cycle, you're just going to get scammed because there is no community. You want to be buying coins that are so unbelievably spiritually strong, it's borderline religious level. That is the holy grail. To build the next big global phenomenon, right? Something that's truly insane. And very, very few coins have the cultural, spiritual, or memetic DNA to make that happen. And to me, okay, an animal cute is fun, it's simple, we've seen Doge prove this, etc. But I think we need something crazier. We need something more unique. We think something more intellectually stimulating. And we need something that's really going to unite people at a deeper level.
Makes sense. It's interesting because there was some opinions when you initially shared the list of yours is that most of the coins there, they were actually appealing more not to like regular people, but to CT type of folks in the first place. If we would essentially remove Giga and maybe USA, most of the coins, they were more appealing to people like from internet culture. They had to understand some things. They had to relate into them. And some critique that is out there essentially is that you were talking about all of these coins and then you just focused on SPX. So like, would you say that SPX mission was just more important? And would you say, it's a very interesting question, because would you say that initially when you were planning the list, you understood that it will be appealing to crypto Twitter, therefore, in a way, you will attract their liquidity this way? Or is it just happened?
So back then, obviously that was like 18 months ago when I started making the list, right? Back then, obviously both me and the market has less knowledge about what's going to happen. And my goal was, okay, I know from past cycles that cult-like communities is the most powerful thing. So the way I was building the list slowly one by one is let me find the most cult-like memes. Let me buy 10 of them. And I don't know which exact one is going to win the most, but I know that cults are good. And so my goal was to kind of accumulate a portfolio of cults that would appeal to different demographics. And I kind of wanted to diversify in terms of kind of like the archetypes that you mentioned, right? So some of these things like Popcat is kind of like a typical like Doge ship story. Some are more like, you know, something like Harry Potter, Obama, Sonic, and Inu would appeal to more like schizo or hipstery people. Something more like Giga would appeal to like the fitness crowds. Something like Retardio would appeal to more sort of like the clown world people, etc. And again, I didn't know who exactly would win, who exactly would resonate with people the most. But my experiment was, let me accumulate a portfolio of cults because cults are good. Now, ultimately, a lot has changed since then. I'm still holding all the coins, and I'm gonna continue to hold as much of them for as long as possible. But I think ultimately, again, because of QT and because of Pump Fun, it's been very competitive. And it's been like even the cult people have been playing the game on hard mode. My thesis is, and that's kind of the only core adjustment I would say from my Singapore era, right? My core adjustment is there can only be so many of these insane whales that are really making things happen, or these insane kind of people that are making things happen. And it's better for us to game theoretically converge into kind of like 1 to 3 coins, so to speak, rather than try to spread ourselves too thin. Because even though I started with 10 coins, the fact that Pump Fun and other launchpads have created 17 million coins after that, it doesn't help. You know what I mean? So the only way to fight 17 million is to reduce, is kind of like to concentrate ourselves even more. And I think it's not just because of me. It's other way. You have to understand the other 10 coins whales behavior also. I think that's a much bigger driver of what's actually happening.
Makes sense. In general, there are not a lot of females in crypto, and they're essentially more than 50% of the population. And in a lot of families in the West, they actually are the ones that control like the making of decisions and all these kind of things. And I think that at the top of the previous cycle, thankfully to partially dog coins like Dogecoin and Shiba, that percentage was increased. Would you say that this is a demographic that like any project should go after? And would it be bullish or beneficial if any project like has a big amount of people involved into it?
This is actually I actually made a video, 150 reasons why I'm bullish on SPX. And one of them was we have a high concentration of girls compared to other crypto projects. Like our leadership is Nicole, another one of community leaders is another Nicole. We have a bunch of girls making content, etc. And our NFTs are actually like anime girl NFTs, right? It's very female friendly. So I agree with you. It's an under-tapped demographic, but girls usually come when normal people come, right? They're not really crypto full time in the grand scheme of things, right? Crypto is 95% male.
Why would you say that? Because like I see men, all men are spending the money on. It seems like it's gambling. Like why do you think it's like that?
Because women are fundamentally valuable just for existing, while a man has to prove himself. And because of that, men are focused on different kind of niche industries like crypto because there's opportunity there for a man to kind of make money or make something of himself or achieve something. In this world that is increasingly becoming automated and hyper competitive, you kind of have to almost go online and go in these communities to see what's going on at the cutting edge of culture, so to speak. Girls, I mean, in most cases, they're kind of enjoying their youth without really having to prove themselves, right? So instead, a median man is much more likely to be hyper online.
That's a very good take. Like that's very fast and a very good take.
Well, it comes down to our biology, right? Because even at the end of the day, it's millions of sperm cells going after one egg, and that's they say the universe is fractal, and you actually step outside at the actual human level, at the macro level, and it's very similar dynamics.
Would you say that Pepe paved the way for SPX?
I think Pepe paved the way for Harry Potter, Obama, Sonic 10 Inu, which paved the way for SPX.
That's because like the point there was that like that it's probably like not seen very much that you're talking or supporting Pepe, and I was curious, like, would you say that in some way SPX is a better play to Pepe?
I do think so.
It's pretty interesting, but like it created its own movement category essentially, and that's why like as a category it would probably do like very well.
So you have to give credit to Pepe for reinvigorating the meme meta this cycle in April 2023. But I think it was actually Harry Potter Obama Sonic Tenino in the summer of 2023, which has paved the way for cult coins, schizo coins, and movement coins.
It's pretty interesting. Through our whole lives, like the prices are just going higher, right? And it's always inflation. What is like the very big side that's happening is that essentially they will just go higher and higher and higher. And once the majority of people are like absolutely agreeing on the fact that they don't have to own anything and they all in magic internet coin, somehow everything just goes back in value and people are just robbed out everything that they had. Like, would you think that like this type of psycho theory makes sense or no?
Can you elaborate on that?
It's like it's a very interesting sign that for 30, 40 plus years the prices are just going up, and everyone is just shitting that like currencies are inflating, and the way out that people essentially see, and the part of the way out is probably something that you're pushing from your end with SPX is to invest into these magic internet coins, and this is the way to protect from inflation and things like that. What if is there a possibility from your point of view that like we are living in a giant psyop because we are conditioned to believe that prices are just always going higher and higher and higher because we see it for all of our lives, and eventually it's another way to scam us eventually, where at the point when we all will be heavily invested in magic internet coins, somehow they will do something and like they return the prices of the assets back?
No, I don't think that's gonna happen, because in all of history of the world, from ancient China to ancient Rome to Portugal to Netherlands to the UK, there's always temptation for governments to print, and it's just going to continue to happen. It's too tempting. It's too easy, because it's essentially a way to tax the population. So the future is definitely crypto. It's not going to be a straight road, but I think the future of monetary value is going to be in decentralized networks, whether it's Bitcoin or something else. It's moving on chain. The entire all of finance is going to move on chain, and I think our grandkids are going to say, "Haha, you guys! I can't believe you guys had the governments controlling your money."
That's pretty interesting. So, on the topic of SPX6900 essentially being the Bitcoin of memes, I know there's no chart, but it definitely shows like significant strength in comparison to most of meme coins out there. I would even say if we're at the bottom of the like wave 3 for most of the meme coins out there, SPX6900 is definitely at some level already and is expanding already. Like it's not, because like most memes, they are closer to April like levels. SPX is not there at this stage. What would you think is the reason for that? And secondly, if SPX is the Bitcoin of memes, SPX dominance is probably quite high currently. Would you think that essentially this SPX dominance will move the liquidity into other places out there that are bottomed out currently in comparison to SPX at this stage?
I think SPX6900 is going to be the biggest coin created this cycle in that category. I'm extremely bullish. The reason why it's stronger than others is because the whales in SPX6900 and even the normal people, they are diamond handing disproportionately more than in other coins. Also, every new person is investing disproportionately more. Like in an average meme, you have people investing like $30, while in the case of SPX6900, you have the average person investing $500. So that's a really big difference, which means that every one person we recruit, it's like a normal meme coin recruiting 10 people. It's essentially, that means that fundamentally at the emotional level, because everything is at the emotional level. At the emotional level, that means that the memetics touch the heart much more, right? And I think that we haven't even gone like into the normal sphere yet. Once we go into the normal sphere, I think this is going to be like GME on steroids. And GME has gone to like 40 billion, I think. And I think SPX is going much, much higher than that. Also, the people in SPX, they hustle and grind and create content much more than anyone else. Essentially, we have the most passionate community of the cycle, simple. And I think once the liquidity improves slightly, and again, we escape the coffers of CT, so to speak, this is going to go parabolic.
Makes sense. You say like pretty, not like bad things about CT, but probably just say the way it is, right? And at the same time, like you were trying to start with, like you started with TikTok, you started with YouTube. It's almost like you see certain way of where the next wave of liquidity would be coming through, and what would be like the main point of contact for them, let's say. So would you say this is the part of your strategy at this stage? Because essentially most of CT liquidity, they already place the bets, they already are in, they already know about all the projects. Like, would you say it's the thoughts behind your actions in terms of the YouTube and TikTok?
Yeah, most of CT is poor and really is just talking a lot of shit without really having much collective power. In the future, crypto will depend on institutions disproportionately for the majors and normal people disproportionately for altcoins. And so my strategy is which coin is going to speak to the hearts and minds of normal people. And I think the holy grail is going big on YouTube and TikTok. I think that has the best return of kind of like effort to results.
That makes sense. Yeah, two best way. Yeah, but it actually makes a lot of sense. So you were talking on 2025 being a very big year and like it's been bullish for meme coins, and you were even saying some points that you would essentially be selling in November of 2025, which is exactly where we're in currently. What went wrong? Do you think like the cycle is extended?
I am still bullish actually for November and December, but I do think the cycle is extended. At this point, I'm going to continue holding for much longer than I initially planned. And for now, I see no reason to stop. I mean, I think the coins that I believe in are going much higher. So pointless to even think about stopping to persist. We're going to persist forever. The majority of my holdings I'm going to hold until 2029. And I think actually, again, like I said earlier, we're in this sideways phase where people are giving up just because BTC is not going up. But I think once the sideways, I think we're actually in reaccumulation. I actually think for all of the coins, all of the good coins, all of this is reaccumulation, and eventually they're gonna go significantly higher.
Yeah, Elliott wave theory definitely supports this as well. Do you think that like 4-year cycle is dead, or?
I think it was never alive in the first place, and it was just the business cycle, liquidity, central banking movements, things like that really drive crypto prices at this point.
Makes sense. In one of the interviews, you mentioned that like you use a lot of like tools for analytics in terms of different on-chain stuff. You mentioned that you're using Lunar Crash as well, right? So if the coin is like consistently in top in terms of social dominance, it probably means that the community is pretty good. Probably means that it's essentially like one of the peaks that you're looking for in coins, right? This was just a short question. So you were quite big on Bitcoin on your X, and then at some point of time you kind of switched mostly to talk about meme coins and alt assets. I do believe that one of the reasons for that, and you were saying this in previous interviews as well, is that SPX is the closest thing to Bitcoin that you see. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah. So back in the day, I got into BTC in 2013 at the top of the market and got into it more full time in 2016, 2017. Back then, BTC was truly countercultural, right? It was about changing the world. It was about changing the entire financial system. It was about, building sound money, creating neo gold, unstoppable payments, really completely changing and revitalizing the entire traditional financial system. Right now, BTC and really the core price drivers of it have changed tremendously. It has become less cypherpunk and more about appealing to traditional finance portfolios, structuring ETFs, building corporate balance sheets, and potentially getting even sovereigns involved, right? So now, as opposed to absorbing the system, and I mean, you could argue that this is a natural course of evolution for any maturing asset, but right now it's more about kind of embedding itself into the system, right? SPX6900 right now reminds me of those 2013 days of BTC, which is truly um, completely radical and interesting in its way, extremely organic, extremely bottom up, really trying to absorb value sort of from this giant bucket into the smaller bucket. And it's really giving me those cypherpunk, counterculture, wholesome, and really these exciting anti-establishment vibes that not only BTC but also GME in 2021 gave me. And I think those feelings that drove GME, I think they're currently even more intense in people's hearts because all of those kind of trends and issues and emotions that underpin GME have actually intensified even more in the last 4 years and are going to continue to intensify even more in the next 15, 20 years. So essentially, time is on our side because with every passing second, all forms of inequality, whether it's financial inequality, social inequality, cultural inequality, reproductive inequality, these things are going to continue widening more and more and more, which means that these emotions, they're going to intensify even more. And I think SPX6900 is going to be one of these sort of 12 or 15 socio-cultural buckets that's going to absorb these things, right?
That's pretty interesting. Like this is an attempt to repeat the BTC story, and you have seen BTC story almost since the beginning, and this is where you essentially see it has a high chance of repeating.
I think so.
Something I was thinking on is that I was a huge proponent of Blast at some point, and I was thinking about some other meme coins that, for example, have more retail normie appeal at this stage. But I do understand that they're like that small. They essentially won't even have a chance to get known by normal people out there. And this was the thesis of the founder of Blast. He was essentially always saying that in order to build a product that will be used by normies, you don't have to focus on normies in the first place. You have to focus on city natives initially, get traction there, and then essentially they would be free marketers for your product. And I think this is something that essentially is happening with SPX6900.
I think so, yeah. We have done a good job at being known in CT, but really the next frontier is going outside of CT.
That's a very interesting thing. It's like the theory of product expansion essentially applied to a meme coin project. That's pretty interesting. So something I was thinking as well on is that SPX is kind of like attached to Western market, is specifically attached to S&P 500 out of the US. Isn't it blocked from the eastern part of the world in
I don't think so, because I think that an increasing number of people in the East know what S&P 500 is, which is kind of the prerequisite for getting the whole idea of SPX 6900, especially people with money. You know, they know what the S&P 500 is because even compared to 10 years ago, the world has been hyper-financialized from an informational point of view also, right? So I think, you know, I've talked to a lot of people from Hong Kong, Singapore, China. They understand what SPX 6900 is.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, it's probably like a longer take, but there was a book by Ray Dalio essentially about changing empires and stuff. And like that we might be in the moment where in the coming 50 years, like the empire of US won't cease to exist, but will lose like the first place. But probably like it doesn't matter at this stage, right?
The civilization that will dominate the next 500 years is going to be the one that gets to AGI faster. So I'm actually making my next YouTube video is about this. That there's like 2 or 3 things that are most important for the next 10 years, and we're essentially going to see a great power conflict between kind of the West with US leading that block and the East with China leading that block. And fundamentally, the new Cold War is really about AI. And each country is going to try to lean into its own strengths. China is increasingly better at things that are physical, but the United States is better at, you know, software, still has the upper leg in AI, and obviously controls the world's most desired money. So what Americans are going to do is they're going to try to print their way to AGI. And in that sense, Americans have an advantage because anyone in the world, whether it's South America, Russia, or Africa, who is holding the dollar, those people are essentially going to be financing the AGI built out in the United States, right? and the people, buying the American treasuries and the American stocks as well, they are the ones that are essentially financing the American AGI ascendancy. So, but ultimately, China also has some advantages in the sense that they are much more efficient. They're not slowed down by democratic or bureaucratic processes as much. If they decide something, they can implement it very quickly, and they can. They actually have way more STEM graduates. I read somewhere, and correct me, I might be wrong here in the numbers, but they have like 300,000 STEM graduates per year, right? Which is much bigger than even what America has. And now the counter argument to this is that, the American universities have the best AI related departments and even the best Chinese people. They want to live in California, etc. But, an increasing number of Asians, they study in the United States and come back to kind of contribute to the motherland as well, right? So it's kind of up in the air who's going to win. America obviously has also an advantages of having, like, at least right now, more control of, ASML, Zeiss, Taiwan microchips, all these things, etc. And still has the better labs for now. But I'm pretty sure at some point, and you're already seeing this with American government taking stakes in kind of important AI-related companies, right? And I think that trend is going to continue. So ultimately, both countries are going to mobilize themselves to win the AI race. Now, if you study the course of history, you will know that wars, even cold wars, are actually inflationary. And if you study the history of inflation, it actually benefits the rich more than the poor, because the rich have assets that kind of move together with inflation. The rich control the stocks, they control the means of production, they control the real estate, that kind of lets them to defend themselves against inflationary pressures, while typically the poor, who either hold $3,000 in the currency or they have wages, these things either lose money or don't grow as fast, right? Now, that's the first step. The second step is, like I said, they're going to print their way to AGI. Printing is bad for inequality, and AGI is also bad for inequality because it's obviously going to destroy hundreds of millions of jobs, right? So essentially, this is by no means a new take, but kind of an obvious logic, right? We're going to enter this two-tier society, where in one case, if you are involved in AI labs or data engineering or some kind of electricity-related manufacturing, or you're an early crypto whale or something like this, you're going to benefit. And if you're not, you're essentially going to be part of an increasing demographic that's going to be negatively affected by AI. Now, in the super far future, if everything works out properly, there's probably going to be some form of UBI, and this cohort is going to be taken care of. But that's not an immediate story, right? There's probably going to be quite a chaotic 10 to 20 year period in between. And in that period, us as investors have to ask ourselves, what are the assets that are going to be benefiting from the AGI build out, from inflationary pressures, and from the widening inequality, right? And I think that SPX6900 is kind of going to be one of the cultural forces that are going to be benefiting from this. And at our current market cap, I still think it's extremely cheaply priced relative to what it can become in the world, right? And essentially, my whole approach is the following, right? What trends are going to become bigger, more intense, faster in the next 10 years, and which assets is that going to benefit?
Makes sense. Isn't like the time bomb for the West because people are freer, and this is just a higher chance for some revolutions if the inequality will be too high? Because in China, like if inequality is high, I think it is already, no one cares because it's a dictatorship.
In many ways, that's one of the advantages of countries like China, because they are ethnically, religiously, linguistically, and culturally homogenous. They can toughen it out for longer, so to speak, right? If you're from the Soviet universe, you can kind of understand what I'm talking about. There's certain cultures that can kind of swallow the bitter pill and kind of grind it out for longer. That's kind of like one of the advantages of a place like China. Essentially, their expectations for their way of life isn't as high as peoples in the West, right? And that's also another advantage. They can also, like I mentioned, mobilize faster. Now, they do have issues of their own, such as within their own kind of internal financial system, and the fact that they still need to catch up in terms of microchip production and a couple of other things. But again, I think both sides have their strengths and weaknesses, and it will be essentially the most interesting story of our time to see kind of who ends up winning this race.
There was a famous post on CT from 2016 where the guy essentially said that they will print until AGI is
chimp.
Yeah,
I saw that.
And isn't this like the setup for World War III? Because if US is winning, the last resort for China is to just start war. Or they might think that if China is winning, the US has the biggest army. And at the same time, war is always a way to shift the attention of people.
The thing is that the American and the Chinese economies are actually quite intertwined. And it's not like in the 1600s where two separate countries can just like go to straight war. There's a ton of financial flows going both ways. There are a ton of Apple factories, other kinds of factories, a bunch of American companies in China. And likewise, the American market is quite important for the Chinese also. So you need to understand like kind of from a capitalist and from a stock market component, a direct hot war would not be good for anybody. So I think for as long as possible, it's probably going to continue to be kind of like a silent technological competition. And I think for the foreseeable, at least for the next 7 or 8 years, I think that's a more accurate angle to look at it from.
Makes sense. It's kind of like probably like the case of the first Cold War where Soviet Union just died because of economic issues.
Yeah, Americans just outgrew them, outspent them, outgrew them, etc. I think Americans won because of memetics. Even in the 1950s, 1960s, the American way of life was kind of more attractive to people in the global periphery that were neither Americans or the Soviets.
That's a very good take.
And essentially those cars and, the white picket fence and the house, that whole memetic, and the burgers, milkshakes, that was just more attractive to people in the middle. And I think Americans won through soft memetics also.
Wow, that's actually a very good take. Because some people and some historians say that the reason Hitler came in power in Europe is because everyone was afraid of the things that would happen if Soviets would come and establish communism. So
I think also the Soviets overextended themselves in Afghanistan, which is like never a good idea to go into Afghanistan. Like no one has succeeded, not even the Mongols. And also just central planning economies don't really work. And you need to allow some form of entrepreneurship to happen to capture the creativity that people have. Because in the Soviet Union, inequality, when it's too extreme, that's not good. That's where we are right now, and that's where we're going. But artificial equality isn't great either. When you have an extremely talented surgeon or an extremely talented scientist essentially making the same as like a factory worker or whatever, that's actually demotivating to the highest talents because they don't really have these 100x, 1000x opportunities to capture their disproportional amount of grit, labor, and creativity. That's bad for economic growth because those people disproportionately. You need these like Elon Musks or mini Elon Musks to drive the next wave of innovation. When you have a centrally planned economy, you kind of stifle that because at the end of the day, the entire idea of communism is building for the nation, for the country. But fundamentally, that's not how the human brain works. The human brain cares about your family, like your children. I don't really care about children at the end of the in Kamchatka, right? I care about my children, right? So you have to build. That's why capitalism has been, at least so far, more successful than socialist systems, in my opinion. I mean, even China is hyper-capitalistic in many ways, right? Because you allow for certain psychological forces to be better aligned with macroeconomic development, right? And communism is not efficient in that way.
Interesting. My question, the next question was like, how would the parabola start for SPX 6900? But like, I see it now that like it's is a bet to benefit from already undergoing Cold War, and the fact that one of the sides would try to print their way out to win.
Absolutely. And so the government printing is one angle. The other angle is how normal people increasingly feel, how they increasingly feel priced out of houses, food. They can't find jobs. AI hasn't even really begun replacing jobs yet, but that's obviously coming. And whether it's 2026 or 2031, AI is going to mass replace like tens of millions, hundreds of millions of jobs rapidly, right? And where are those people going to go? I think essentially they're going to go where other people are. Because essentially, as machines take over more and more aspects of our lives, the things that they can't replace is things such as community, spirituality, and everything to do with like heart, souls, and emotions. And whoever can tokenize that best and absorb that kind of spiritual demand the best, those assets are going to win.
I would say like portion of the people would probably like lean towards anger, and the other portion towards like just feeling of loss.
Yes.
Would you say that SPX is mostly capturing the feeling of anger?
I look at it in a different way. I said in one of the videos recently that if you are a young man, let's say you are 25, right? And you're growing up in the West, you essentially have two choices only. You either self-improve, or you do something, or you take action, or you make some bets, or you, what's called, lay down and rot. You give up, right? That's your only two choices in life. And I am choosing the first path, and I think a lot of other people will choose the first path as well. Frankly, do you even want the latter in your community? I don't know. I don't think so. You want as many of the former in your community as possible, and I'm already seeing that SPX is attracting those kinds of people.
Makes sense. Like if feeling of anger is connected, or just a feeling of like trying to overcome something and just say that like it's unfair and like just do something. These people, they will be like more loud by default as well, which is obviously very nice. Some like people in the industry say that you're on this self-destructive journey. What would you say to that?
I've never been happier, never felt healthier than I am right now. Very bullish, very optimistic for the coming months and years. So I'm very bullish on myself. That's all I'll say.
That makes sense. Is there a chance like you see yourself, or like if we would just imagine a hypothetical scenario where like you stop talking about SPX tomorrow, like what would happen?
So I want to see this movement go towards 1 trillion plus, and there's no reason for me to stop pushing this, stop promoting this. That being said, though, ultimately, as SPX grows bigger and bigger, my relative importance will diminish, and that's a good thing because you want this movement to be as decentralized as possible.
Makes sense.
I don't want to be the leader. I want to be just a strong participant. I want to be just another node in the network, and that's my goal. I don't want the system to rely on me. I just want to be a good captain of the system, right?
Makes sense. So, like in connection to the first thesis of yours, since you were not changing anything in the portfolio, not talking about any new coins since then, would you say that like there is no option for no new calls to appear, which will generally overtake over a significant market share?
I'm sure there will be coins. I mean, there's always coins doing some kind of pumps, but it's essentially harder and harder. Again, the people on Pump Fund and other launchpads that create coins, they do it in a systematic way, right? Like they wake up and they create either 50 coins per day manually, or I've heard there are people already building systems to create them in an algorithmic way. And it's going to get more and more automated. It's going to get more and more industrialized. That means that each new coin that comes out and wants to become a long-term cult, it's fighting an increasingly uphill battle against an increasingly larger number of coins created per day, right? So because all of these coins are trying to take your attention. All of these coins are trying to steal people's money, people's time, people's attention, right? So I think I've kind of had this theory that the coins created in 2023, 2024, they have an advantage because they at least had a year or so to grow up in an environment which was more similar to like Shiba's, where it was the relatively fewer coins. Like when Popcat and Whiff came out, it was only like 50 coins. Like the launchpads weren't a thing yet. You know what I mean? And that's why they ran. But ultimately, you want to have that hardcore community that's really set on that one coin and that are going to continue onboarding, continue growing. And right now it's harder to do because back then they had the sort of, you know how a plane needs some land, needs some time to go up. It's a similar type of logic.
Makes sense. So a lot of people like from these communities from the meme coins 2023, they say that they're dead, like Weave, Popcat, FWalk, AppWeave, and in some cases Bobo, all these like lower Ethereum, Mog, Ticker Bitcoin as well. Like, would you say they're coming back?
I think they are going to have a renaissance when the liquidity comes back. I'm still bullish on the list overall. I just think that SPX6900 is the closest to that anti-establishment GME feeling, which people are gonna love, and it has that product in it that is just so fun to push, precisely because it has that kind of spicy countercultural take to it. It's almost like a massive cultural critique at scale, and I really like that. I really like that GME style anti-TradFi sentiment, and I think a lot of people will also. And so it's just a more interesting story to succeed, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a bet. As I see, it's a bet on the fact that like the traction that is present within crypto natives and the way the product is packaged is enough to traction from the outside, like normal people, next wave of liquidity, pretty much.
And also, when you're buying SPX6900, you know that there are 1,000 people that are, even while you're asleep, they're going to be hustling on your behalf, which is something that very few coins can say.
That's good stuff. All right, you mentioned something on the fact that like people become spiritually better when they buy SPX and like they lose weight. Like, is this just the effect of the coin? Is this something you see? Is this just something you try to push within the community or?
Yeah. So there are essentially two kinds of coins. If you see whales in a certain coin, flex, their AP watches or Urus purchases, sell, right? Just sell, because that's just not going to scale. These people are essentially already celebrating instead of continuing to delay gratification. On the other extreme, you have coins like SPX6900, and in that sense, it reminds me of early BTC as well, where you have people that are not materialistic, that are interested in what's going on in the world, and that are trying to do something about it. People that are extremely supportive. People that are truly spiritually united, even in many cases without talking to one another directly. Through our posting, whether it's text or video, we communicate implicitly. And that's what's building this emergent sort of organization, right? There's no leader. There's no planning. There's no team. And many people, like you've alluded to, have lost weight, have started running, have started working out, have really improved a lot of different aspects of their lives, because SPX6900 tells you to think long-term, not short-term, to believe in something rather than trade something, to hold rather than gamble. And I think these things, they just make you a better person, make you a more patient person, make you delay gratification, make you aim for higher things, and ultimately it's attracting those kind of people. And it's like 300 Spartans that can defeat 10,000 Athenians. Why? Because together it's like a 1 + 1 = 3 type situation, and then 1 + 1 + 1 = 9 type situation. And so it keeps, like, there's synergies, right? And like 1,000 people from SPX6900, it's like 10,000 people from another community. It's just such high quality people. And ultimately, that's going to have what I call trickle down culture. And that's why you're seeing these effects where people are essentially commenting that their life has gotten better. And now they're not trading, they're not staring at charts, they're just improving their lives and holding SPX. And if there's another 100,000 people come like this, that's just going to build on itself,
It's very interesting. Like, I see the whole thing is very very well thought through. Like, it all makes sense, and you definitely put like a lot of time into thinking. And like, it's not just thoughts, because like it's reality as well. like there's 100% something different about this one, and all these things like they actually make sense.
You should join us on our mission, man.
Sure. Yeah, it's pretty insane talk for me, to be honest, because like all of these actually make sense. I think I'm out of the questions at this stage. So we are like at the peak uncertainty in the market at this stage. We are probably like at the bottom for majority of meme coins out there. Many people are calling for the bear markets. Anything specific you would like to say or you wanted to discuss?
Not financial advice. Buy SPX6900. Look into SPX6900. Join us on our grand mission to flip the stock market.
That's it.
That's it.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.